Good morning. Hey. Hi. How is everybody? Book club returns today. Aw, I missed you guys too. What in the world? Oh. You really can't go anywhere without people destroying your home, I tell you what. Oh, God. What did they do? What is wrong with these people? Ah. I don't like it. Why did I think you were going straight to the UK from here? I don't know why you thought that. I definitely wasn't. I'm home. How was the fancy event? I think it was good. How are you all? Because opportunity knocked. How is everybody without book club? Did you all survive? How was the trip back? The trip back was hectic and not fun. Delays and smoke and wild times. Not really the best at all. I got home at 1:15 this morning. Yikes. Morning, Becca. I thought you weren't going to be here. Did I imagine that? Did I read wrong? Do I not know things? Did I miss something? I need coffee desperately. Got about 4.5 hours of sleep. I'm already doing laundry and fixing stuff that everybody destroyed in my absence. You know how you didn't imagine that, but I hadn't heard from her. All right, well then we hang out with us. Bing, bang, boom. Man, that coffee smells good. I do not like coffee on the road. That is the one hard thing about traveling, is not having good coffee. Are able to relax a little bit? No. I will be working this morning, and then I will be getting in a car at noon to drive to an event that I will be doing this weekend. It's about 4 hours away, and I have to be there before 5 o'clock. So I'm leaving at noon. So I have a very fast turnaround today. Very fast turnaround. Just one of those weekends. It's very busy. Gotta work, gotta make money, you know, the whole shebang. It's gonna be weird with the Tonys not on. Morning, Jody. It's gonna be weird with the Tonys not on TV though, right? It's gonna be weird. Very weird. Coffee. You can't use your money if you're not taking care of your bills. I know, but I gotta pay bills. They changed it. They are going to be on TV. I thought they weren't televising it. Did I make that up? I thought they weren't televising the Tonys. Oh man. Hey Haley, having this coffee back is the greatest gift. Like, oh man, it'll be like last year when the first half was streaming, the second half was on CBS. Oh. It's just unscripted. Oh, cool. That seems fine. All right. Let's have some coffee while the laundry is going, because I can't pack for this weekend until my clothes are clean. I have no clean clothes. So we're going to read while my clothes become clean. Yes, all the coffee. I don't understand why people feel the need to move things always. Like, I go away for a few days and I come home and things are in different places. Why? Why, I ask you? Hey, Kaylee, how you feeling? I'm sure it was my mom or Catherine or somebody. I don't know. Somebody moved things. Hello. This chair was in a different spot than when I left. That drives me nuts. Yeah, it drives me nuts too. Like, I think people think I won't notice that they've moved stuff, but have they not figured out by this third decade of my life that I notice everything? Wherever you move it? No. I went to the little thing where my coffee pods go and there was an entire empty sleeve not replaced. Why? Why throw something away and not replace it? Watch the Tonys only on CBS? Why is that? Yeah, I very much live alone. Hot. Very hot. Hotter than I expected. All right, time to dive back into Land of Stories. Because you've got bills to pay. Nice. Okay, I'll do that for you, Brian. I don't know. Actually, I don't know if when are the Tonys this year? Is it this weekend? I might not be able to watch. I might not be home. I might still be at the event. Yeah, I don't come home until late Sunday night from the event this weekend. It's a full weekend thing, about 4 hours away. Yeah, sorry. I won't even be home to watch it. Sorry, guys. Wheel? I mean, I don't have cable anyway. I don't know why I said that. Like, I could watch it. I don't have cable. I just have, the internet. All right. Are we ready to read? Is everybody here? Is everybody ready? Back to the Land of Stories. Yes. All right. Chapter 9. The Gathering in the Woods. Alex and Connor slowly crawled out of the pond. They were soaked, muddy, and covered in lily pads. They shivered in the cool night air and held themselves tightly as they looked at the land around them. The ugly duckling pond was in the middle of a forest in the northern kingdom. The twins had passed it on their previous trip into the Land of Stories, but neither had expected to become so acquainted with it on their next visit. I cannot believe we just sank Grandma's house, Connor said through chattering teeth. It takes a lot of talent to submerge something that isn't even close to water. Bits and pieces of their grandmother's cottage were still floating in the pond. Her rocking chair bobbed up and down in the water. Alex was so amazed she didn't even care how dirty or cold she was. I sure hope Grandma has a really good house insurance. Alex, are you even listening to me? Connor asked. She turned to face him. The excitement was practically glowing in her eyes. She didn't care how they'd gotten there. They were finally there, and that was all that mattered. We're here! We're actually here! Alex said. Even trembling jaw couldn't take the smile off her face. Despite the circumstances, it was the first time that Alex had been happy in months. Congratulations, you managed to successfully and dangerously transport us into the fairy tale world. Again, Connor said with a smile of his own. I've got to say, I prefer Grandma's method of transportation to yours. Alex's smile disappeared as the reality set in. She surveyed the forest and the pond more closely. Something's wrong, she said. Alex... Well, of course something's wrong, Connor said. Grandma's cottage is at the bottom of a pond. How are we going to explain that one to her? That's not what I meant, Alex said. Listen, do you hear that? Connor raised his eyebrows and looked from side to side. The pond and the forest around it were dead silent. I don't hear anything, Connor said. Exactly, Alex said. We're standing at the edge of a pond and there's no sounds at all? No frogs or crickets or anything? Connor nodded, understanding what she meant. It was so eerie that he was surprised he hadn't noticed it before. Huh, it's like everything's on mute, he said. Or hiding, Alex said. Suddenly from the other side of the pond, a dark figure emerged from the trees. It startled the twins at first until they saw that it was small, barely the size of a dog. It was running very fast on 4 skinny legs and had something white trailing behind it. Alex and Connor hid behind the closest tree and watched it from afar. The strange creature slowed into a fast and springy walk as it delicately approached the pond. It was wearing a dark cloak and lowered its hood with its front paws before taking a drink from the water. The moonlight was reflecting off the water and it illuminated the mysterious visitor. The twins could make out what it was now. It had dark red fur, pointy ears, and a long fluffy tail with a white tip. It's a fox, Connor whispered to Alex. The fox jerked his head up from the water and his bright yellow eyes stared in their direction.
He must have had impeccable hearing. The twins stayed still. The fox headed for the trees in the opposite direction from whence he had come. Where's he going? Alex whispered to her brother. Do I look like an expert on cloaked mammals? Connor said. The fox disappeared into the trees. But besides being the only living thing that they had seen, there was something very intriguing about him. Neither of the twins wanted him out of their sight. We should follow him, Connor said. Why? Alex asked. Connor shrugged. Do we have another plan that we're supposed to be following? He said. Good point, Alex said, and without another moment to waste, the twins began chasing after the small fox, hoping that he would lead them to something or someone that would help them find their mother. Alex and Connor ran after the fox for a good while. He wasn't sticking to the path, so it was hard to see him between the trees ahead. He was incredibly fast for his size, too, so it was difficult to keep up with him. They were happy to run and warm their bodies, though. Their clothes began to dry the more that they went. Well, it looks like we're going into the dwarf forest, Alex whispered as she jogged. How can you tell? Connor asked. The trees are getting thicker, and it's getting harder to see the sky, Alex said. Also, I'm feeling more anxious the further we run. That's the biggest clue. Connor gulped. Dwarf forests had never been a good place for the twins. The last time they'd been in this part of the land of stories, they had been chased by wolves and kidnapped by goblins. The fox came into view ahead, and the twins came to a belated stop. Like cars with bad brakes, they hid behind the biggest tree they could find, and each gestured for the other to be quiet. The fox was standing on his hind legs next to a stone well in the middle of a clearing. The moon illuminated the clearing like a spotlight. The fox stood very still, keeping a close watch on the trees around him. He was waiting, but for what, the twins couldn't tell. At one point, the fox looked directly at the twins' hiding spot, but didn't appear to see them. The twins wondered if they blended in with the rest of the forest because they were so dirty, or just because it was so dark. It was unnervingly quiet, and the dwarf forest, too. It was surprising, since the twin had remembered hearing all kinds of troubling sounds coming from close by and afar the last time they were there. A few twigs snap echoed into the night as someone or something made its way into the clearing. The fox jerked its head in the direction of the snap and smiled, exposing several tiny, sharp teeth. A sly expression came to his face, and the twins couldn't tell if it was because he was pleased or just because he was a fox. 3 cloaked figures stepped into the clearing. They were all different shapes and sizes. One was enormous, another one was only a little bigger than the twins, and the third was as tiny as the fox. A large raven swooped into the clearing, perching on the well next to the fox. It didn't need a cloak. Its dark feathers were enough to camouflage it in the night. The others surrounded the well, all facing the fox. The fox rubbed his small paws together. So glad you could all make it, the fox said through his toothy grin. The smallest of the cloaked figures lowered its hood. He had shiny black eyes, white stripes, and a short snout. It was a badger, and a paranoid one at that. It isn't safe for us to be out at night like this, the badger said and looked nervously around. At least not anymore. Relax, Badger, the fox said. If the enchantress wanted to harm us, we would be dead by now. Get to the point, Fox, the raven squawked impatiently. Why did you call us all here tonight? The largest figure lowered its hood. It was a gigantic brown bear. Make it fast, I've got cubs at home, the bear said with a booming and growly voice. Alex and Connor had never seen so many talking animals in the same place before. They hoped their presence would remain unnoticed. I've just returned from the Eastern Kingdom, the fox said. I heard the enchantress did a number on it, but I wanted to see with my own 2 eyes. The whole place is a disaster. It's covered in vines and thorn bushes as far as the eye can see. It's worse than I ever imagined, as if the thorn bush pit had taken over the entire kingdom. Oh, dear, the badger squealed and began nervously tapping his paws together. Is it going to cross into other kingdoms? I hate thorns, the raven said. That's the thing, the fox explained. The plants grow perfectly along the border, and they don't cross into the northern kingdom at all. I even tried provoking a plant with a stick, but it only coiled around the edge and touched the Eastern Kingdom ground. Takes very powerful magic to be that specific. The animals exchanged worried expressions. The remaining hooded member of the group maintained his silence. Alex and Connor wondered what kind of creature was under that cloak. Why would the plants only stay in one kingdom? The bear asked. I reckon the enchantress was taking over the world in style, the fox said. She's doing it one kingdom at a time and showing the world that the happily ever after assembly is no match for her. It's the only a matter of time before she takes over Dwarf Forest too, and we must be prepared. But what would she want with the Dwarf Forests? The badger asked, shaking his head. It's full of nothing but criminals and outcasts like us. The fox's grin grew bigger. Exactly why I called you all here tonight, he said. I think we should pledge our allegiance to the enchantress now, before she strikes. The animals grunted and growled in their protest. You're out of your mind, fox, the bear said. We're already fugitives, the raven said. You want us to get locked away in Pinocchio prison next? The fox raised his paws at them, calming their nerves. Hear me out before you disregard me entirely, he said. Think about it. The reason that we live in these parts is because none of us could fit in the happily ever after assembly regulated society. The enchantress is going to change all that. The world of fairies and man is over. If we show loyalty to her now, then when she takes over, and she will take over, she may spare us. The fox was slowly starting to convince the animals. They all remained quiet except the badger. We can't do that, the badger said. It's already bad enough living in exile. Can you imagine what they'll do to us if we sided with her? That's where you're mistaken, Badger, the fox said. You're still in the happily ever after frame of mind. I saw what the enchantress is capable of. Trust me, all the fairies in the world aren't going to be able to stop her this time. If they could, they would have done it already. The animals looked back and forth to one another. All were afraid to be the first to express their interest. Well, how would we show our allegiance? The bear asked. You're not agreeing with him, are you? The badger asked the bear. The bear growled restlessly. Well, we're already castaways. What more can they do to us? He said. If the world is changing, why not change with it? Especially if there's something in it for us. The raven bobbed up and down, contemplating. What's your plan, Fox? She asked. I've been asking around and I've got some ideas, the fox said. His mouth dropped, but a smile was in his eyes that hadn't. Well, what about you? The raven squawked in the direction of the unidentified creature. You've been awfully quiet. The hooded creature looked around at his fellow animals and nodded his head. A simple, singular ribbit came from underneath his hood. Alex and Connor both gasped. Could it be? The badger must have heard the twins' reaction because he grew more timid than ever. Oh, we should get out of here before we get caught. Think it over, the fox said. You'll know where to find me. All of the animals put their hoods back over their heads and disappeared into the night. The fox took one last look around the forest before following the others. Perhaps the badger's paranoia had gotten into him. The twins knew that they wanted to follow the mysterious hooded creature. They made sure the other animals were at a safe distance and then bolted through the forest after their new target. The forest had become darker and darker as they went, and the twins had been running for a few minutes, jumping over boulders and tree roots. They were cold, tired, and lost. It was almost nostalgic for them, reminding them of their last trip, but there was no sign of the hooded creature. I don't get it, he said. He was just there. Alex said. It's like he disappeared into the Ah! Connor screamed. Alex turned to see what had startled her brother. Emerging from the trees directly behind them was the hooded creature. He was much taller and more menacing than he had looked in the clearing. He began slowly walking towards the twins. They clutched each other in fear. We're sorry for following you, Connor said. We thought we might have known you. The creature kept coming towards them. You better get away from us, Connor said, taking another approach. My sister knows magic. She just sank a house and she'll mess you up. Alex stared at her brother in disbelief. Did he really think that this was going to be helpful? The creature froze just a few feet away from them and looked up at the twins and then side to side. Connor picked up a big stick from the ground and began swinging it in the hooded creature's direction. I played t-ball in elementary school. He said, I'm warning you. A soft chuckle came from underneath the creature's cloak. Come now, is that really how you're going to greet an old friend? Said a familiar and proper voice. Its owner slowly removed its hood and the twins sighed with relief. Froggy! The twins exclaimed and they jumped into a hug, huge and violently embracing their old friend. Hello, Connor. Hello, Alex. Froggy said and hugged them back. I wish I could say it's surprising seeing you two here, but you've always had a knack for being in danger. Froggy was a tall, man-sized frog with big, bright eyes and a wide mouth. He always dressed to impress, the twins noticed. He was wearing a three-piece suit under his cloak. It's so good to see you, Froggy, Connor said. We've missed you so much, Alex said. And I've missed you, Froggy said as he leaned down to look at both of them in the eye. You've both grown so much, you're practically grown-ups. His expression fell once he remembered when this reunion was taking place. What on earth are you two doing here at a time like this? Does your grandmother know where you are? Alex and Connor exchanged guilty glances at each other. Not really, Connor said. Grandma doesn't exactly know where we are, Alex said, not looking him in the eye. I should certainly hope not, Froggy said. The dwarf forest is still too dangerous for you to be in, especially these days, and especially this late. Alex and Connor gave each other a glance. I recognize that look, Froggy said. What aren't you telling me, and why are you both so filthy? Alex and Connor considered lying to him for a second, but they both knew that they couldn't. Our grandmother doesn't know that we're in this world at all, Alex confessed. Froggy's wide mouth fell open and stared blankly at the twins. How did you get here? Alex sank our grandmother's house. I wasn't kidding when I said that, Connor said. That's why we're covered in swamp juice. It was horrifying and strangely awesome at the same time. You sank a house? Froggy asked, dumbfounded. You know, normally I would question such possibility, but I don't with you two. It was an accident, Alex said. I activated another one of Grandma's portals. Your technique needs work, Connor said on the side of his mouth. Froggy looked around the forest. They could tell knowingly they had snuck into the fairy tale world, and that made him uneasy. Children, you shouldn't be here, he said. These are very dangerous times. An evil enchantress is at large. Esmia. Sorry, I don't know why I couldn't pronounce that all of a sudden. Esmia, Alex said. We know all about her. She's kidnapped our mom. What? Froggy said. Oh, I'm so sorry. Not as sorry as we are, Connor said. And our grandmother practically imprisoned us trying to stop from coming here to get her. Well, clearly it worked, Froggy said with an eye roll. She has met you two, hasn't she? Are you even capable of sitting still? Relatable content. Thank you, Connor said, glad of the validation. Wait, Alex said, noticing something for the first time. Froggy, you're a frog again. Oh yeah, Connor said. What gives? Despite his transformation back into Prince Charlie, the long-lost Prince Charming, Alex and Connor still imagined him as a frog whenever they thought of him. They had to remind themselves that this wasn't his natural form. I'm undercover, Froggy said. Your grandmother transformed me back into a frog so I could keep watch over the animals and criminals living in Dwarf Forest during this crisis. We figured that they'd trust me more as an amphibian. Some of them even remember me from when I was living here before. Are they really going to join the Enchantress? Alex asked. I doubt it, Froggy said. These are just a bunch of crooks trying to make the current situation work for them. I wouldn't worry too much about it, but still, the Happily Ever After Assembly wants to keep an eye on them just in case things change. Froggy folded his arms and looked between the twins. I'm sure they'd be much more interested in knowing what you two are up to. Froggy, you can't tell anyone that we're here, Connor said. They'll send us back. We can't be stuck at home not knowing where our mom is when she's in danger, Alex said. They both looked up at him with pleading eyes. Children, you know that I care about you deeply, but Froggy started but was interrupted. We are not children, Connor shouted. Everyone keeps calling us that, and I'm sick of it. We shouldn't have to prove ourselves after everything we've been through already. It's not like we're a couple of irresponsible kids sneaking into a party. We're two young adults trying to save their mother's life. You can tell our grandmother if you want to, Alex said. She can lock us up at home all she wants, but we'll just keep finding a way to get back here until our mom is safe. We have to find her, Froggy, Connor said. We already lost our dad. We can't lose our mom too. We're not going to stop until we save her. Froggy hopelessly looked back and forth between them with his big, glossy eyes. They put him between a rock and a hard place. First things first, Froggy said. We need to get out of the dwarf forest before anyone else sees you. Let's get somewhere safe and we'll discuss it further. Alex and Connor nodded, but they already knew that there wasn't going to be anything to discuss. His loyalty to them was much stronger than it was to their grandmother. He was their first friend before he was their subject. Before he was her subject. Froggy placed his cloak over the twins and led them safely through the forest. Alex and Connor were so relieved to have miraculously made contact with an ally so soon, but they knew the worst was yet to come, and the uncertain days were just ahead. Dun dun dun. What time is it? Ooh, it's only 7:11. We got plenty of time. Ooh, we are living it up, folks. We can read more chapters. Anybody want to read more chapters? I don't know why I'm talking like that. You're a carnival barker. Step right up. More chapters of the book. Anyway, we're on chapter 10. And in case anyone's keeping track, I think we're about a fourth of the way through the book, because the book is about 520 pages long approximately, and we're at 140. It's raining here. It's a good day. It is not raining here. I have to hop in 20 minutes for a meeting, but let's go. All right, let's go. Chapter 10, Rumpelstiltskin's Debt. Pinocchio prison was home to the most dangerous criminals in all the kingdoms. It was a tall, dark fortress that sat at the center of a long peninsula that curved around Mermaid Bay in the southern part of the Eastern Kingdom. It was perched atop a high and rocky cliff with sharp spikes pointing inward and outward at every window, so there was no possible way of escape or to gain unauthorized entry. But you're also not having crazy fires like they are in Canada. True. I forgot. You are in the part of Canada with fire. Yes, I'm glad it's raining for you. Yes. Oddly, it's less fiery over here than it was when I left New York, which is very backwards. Usually it's much fierier in California. But we've had so much rain in California this year that I don't anticipate there being any wildfires in California probably for the next 2 years. Like we got so much rain in the last 6 months that we're out of the drought, and we won't be out of water for like 2 to 3 years, they said. It's wild. We had so much rain. It's crazy. Enchanted wooden soldiers patrolled the narrow stone halls, keeping watch on the lawbreakers behind the bars. The majority of those were locked away were the typical sheep-stealing type of ogres, kidnapping witches, and man-eating animals that had been caught before they fled into dwarf forest. The prison was also the home of a great mystery. During the 100-year sleeping curse of the Eastern Kingdom, the prison had been the only place in the kingdom that had been spared. Oh, really, Abby? That sucks. Yeah, we've been getting rain pretty much nonstop since like October last year, and it's still been raining this week. Sarah Silverman is saying that Bedwetter will eventually make it to Broadway. I mean, Ellen will definitely be a part of it if it goes. There's no question of that. She's definitely going to stick with it, I think. I would be shocked to find otherwise. Sorry, okay, let's focus. Because it's only bad for sensitive groups, but there's a lot of those after COVID. Yeah, that's true. The prison was also the home of a great mystery. During the 100 years sleeping curse the Eastern Kingdom had endured, the prison had been the only place in the kingdom that had been spared. All the soldiers and inmates inside had strangely remained conscious while the rest of the country slumbered. More recently, the mystery had developed when the prison also became the only place in the kingdom not covered in the enchantress's demonic thorn bushes and vines. Whether it was a fluke or a miracle was the question. Many assumed that the prison was just too far removed to be affected by the curses. However, unbeknownst to all the soldiers and the inmates inside, the prison's exclusion from the kingdom's greatest woes was due to a high-profile prisoner who resided on the 13th floor. Rumpelstiltskin was serving his 127th year behind bars. He was a very small man with large baggy eyes, a button nose, and short hair that clung to his head like a helmet. He wore a large collared shirt, tight pants on his tiny legs, and pointed red shoes that jingled when he walked. After his infamous failed attempt to take the firstborn child of the Eastern Kingdom's former queen, Rumpelstiltskin went into hiding. But after a few years of being at large, oh my God, I just had a great idea. Okay, sorry. The small man couldn't live with the guilt of what he had almost done. So 127 years ago, he decided to turn himself in, and he had lived in Pinocchio prison ever since. Rumpelstiltskin had a tiny chamber all to himself. He had 2 barred windows, one on the heavy door of his cell and another one on the wall facing Mermaid Bay. Both were too high for him to see out of unless he jumped, so the dark stones of his chamber floor and the walls were all he had to look at every day. His life had simplified greatly while in prison. He slept on a large stack of hay in the corner and ate at a tiny table pushed to the side with only one spoon and a bowl in his possession. Although Rumpelstiltskin had magic capabilities, he had decided to give them up when he went to prison, fearing magic would only lead him to trouble. He kept his quarters as simple as possible. The first decade or so of imprisonment was incredibly lonely for this little man, but luckily for him, an unexpected roommate eventually moved in. One day, a strong ocean breeze blew a seed into his chamber, and a week later, a small daisy began to grow in between two rocks of the stone floor. No, it's not slime related, but it's a pretty good idea. I'll tell you when this chapter's over. Rumpelstiltskin was amazed that such a thing could happen. How could something so pleasant grow in such a miserable place? Of all the locations in the world, why did it decide to land here? He pondered the question for a great while, glad of something to distract him from his solitude and shame. He ultimately decided that the flower must have needed a friend as much as he did and presented itself in his cell, and its presence in his cell had been purposeful. He took great care of the flower, impressively keeping it alive the entire time he had been in prison. He shared his water with the daisy, he told it stories, and when it fell ill, he would stand on his tiptoes by the window with his spoon and reflect sunlight towards it until it regained its strength. To the average person, having a flower as a companion may have seemed a little odd, but for Rumpelstiltskin, it was the best friend he had ever had. The flower never mocked him for the clothes that he wore like others had in his past. The flower never judged him for wanting most out of life. The flower never used him for political gain, and the flower never condemned him for the mistakes he had made for many years before. The flower was only capable of doing one thing: sharing its beauty. In a way, life in prison had been the best thing that had ever happened to Rumpelstiltskin, giving him the most meaningful relationship that he had ever had. However, his self-surrender hadn't been the only way for him to clear his conscience. It was also a way for him to protect himself from the alliances he had made in the past. And unfortunately, after he had spent so long hiding from his past eventually found him. It was just before sunset when a thunderous noise was heard outside the prison. It was an intense combination of snapping, crunching, and popping that became louder and louder by the second. The prison began to shake. His bowl and spoon rattled on the table. Whatever it was getting closer. Rumpelstiltskin jumped up and down at his window, trying to see what was causing the commotion. What he saw was the most terrifying sight he had seen in years. Like an enormous earthly stampede, a tsunami of angry thorn bushes and vines traveled across the land, growing in the prison's direction. "Oh no," Rumpelstiltskin gasped, clasped his hands around his mouth, and looked at his cell. There was only one person capable of such magic, and after 127 years, he knew that she had finally come for him. The wooden soldiers rushed around the hall in a panic. "Thorn bushes and vines are headed for the prison!" one shouted. "Prepare for an attack!" another shouted. Rumpelstiltskin looked down at the daisy. It was quivering. There, little flower," he said, and gently stroked one of its leaves. "Everything is going to be all right. I'm going to hide you." He quickly retrieved his bowl off the table and covered his friend with it. The prison was hit by the plants and impacted by the whole, and the impact made the whole fortress sway. The thorn bushes and vines crawled up the sides of the structure, wrapping it around like an army of serpents until all the windows were covered and the prison went dim inside. After a few quiet moments, a series of soft rumbles pulsed through the prison like a giant heartbeat. Each rumble was stronger than the next and came from several floors below Rumpelstiltskin's cell. Something was slowly making its way higher and higher through the prison. Rumpelstiltskin could hear all the wooden soldiers from above rushing down to fight off whatever was intruding below. The clanking of their weapons echoed as they tried fighting it off. They were definitely fighting off more than just plants. Finally, Rumpelstiltskin heard of the battle reach the 13th floor. He was too scared to move. He smelled things burning, and the smoke started to fill his cell from underneath the door. Each soldier's scream was followed by a loud thud as their wooden bodies hit the floor one by one. Once all the soldiers were gone, a pair of soft footsteps came down the hall and stopped at Rumpelstiltskin's cell door. He was trembling, afraid that these were his last moments alive. A bright flash of violet light blasted through the cell door and into smithereens. Rumpelstiltskin braced himself and was pelted by its debris. Once the smoke from the blast had cleared, he finally saw who had been causing all the chaos. Standing in the doorway of his cell was a tall and beautiful woman. She had long magenta hair that floated and rippled above her like slow-moving flames. Her eyes were violet with long feathered eyelashes like a moth's antenna. She wore a long purple gown matching gloves and a high collar. A ghostly cape flowed around her and through the hall like a thick sheet of smoke. "Esmea?" Rumpelstiltskin said in horror. The enchantress's bright red lips curved into a smirk. "Hello, Rumpy," Esmea said in her playful, airy voice. "How I've missed you." Esmea stepped into Rumpelstiltskin's cell and examined the small chamber. Vines and thorn bushes followed her, growing all around the walls of the cell, covering the inside of the prison as she traveled through it. "Oh, I love what you've done with the place," Esmea said sarcastically, passing the stack of hay he used as a bed. "It doesn't fit the man of your exquisite taste, though, does it? I can't imagine why you'd abandon me to spend 13 decades in here." Rumpelstiltskin remained very still, knowing it wasn't wise to make sudden movements around such a dangerous creature. Have you come to kill me?" he said with a quivering jaw. The enchantress forced out a theatrical laugh that did little to comfort him. "Why would I want to kill my oldest friend?" she said with a menacing smile. "Besides, if I wanted you dead, I would have killed you ages ago." Her smile faded and her violet eyes glared down at him. "Why else do you think I've spared you from all the curses I've cast over the kingdom so far?" Rumpelstiltskin had always wondered if the exceptions were because of him. "Well, if you aren't going to kill me, then what brings you here?" he asked, trembling even more. He was convinced she must have fate worse than death planned for him. "Look at you, Rumpy. You're just as helpless as the day I found you," Esmea said pityingly. "When we met, you were just another miserable dwarf working in the mines, but I knew that you and I were kindred spirits. We both wanted more than the world was offering us, and we were both ostracized because of it." I never meant to anger you," Rumpelstiltskin said and lowered his head. "I had to turn myself in. I couldn't live with what I had done." "Or what you failed to do, that is," Esmea said. "But it's all forgiven." Rumpelstiltskin knew her too well to believe her. Esmea had something up her sleeve. She always did. "Well, what do you want from me?" he asked. Esmea went to the window. The vines and thorn bushes covering the outside parted so she could see the view of the bay. "Like it or not, we made a deal," she said. "I've come back so you can finally fulfill your end of our bargain. I saved you from a melancholy life in the mines. I made you my apprentice and taught you magic, and all I've ever asked in exchange was for your assistance." You never said that I would have to kidnap a child," Rumpelstiltskin said, "and a princess, no less." "I've made it incredibly easy for you," Esmea said sharply, her tone growing angry. "I bewitched the king into thinking he needed a wife who could spin hay into gold. I chose the village girl he ordered to do so. I planned the whole negotiation between the two of you, and all you had to do was take the child that was owed to you." "You wanted me to do your dirty work," Rumpelstiltskin peeped. "You wanted my name to be tarnished if anything went wrong." "Of course I did," she said unapologetically. "I was still in the happily ever after assembly at the time. I couldn't get caught stealing an infant princess. As far as the fairies knew, I was still one of them." "As far as I knew, you were still one of them too," Rumpelstiltskin said. "I thought I was going to be the apprentice to a great fairy, not an enchantress who was plotting secretly to take over the world." Esmea took delight in remembering the deception. "Yes, Everyone was surprised, she said. Of course, all that changed when the rest of the fairies found out that you were working for me, and I wasn't invited to the child's christening. I lost my temper and cursed the whole kingdom to die. They would have too, if the fairy godmother hadn't converted my curse into a pathetic sleeping curse. The enchantress closed her eyes and massaged the side of her head. And since then, Sleeping Beauty has been my own personal nightmare, she said. You should have seen her face when I attacked her in the forest, though. There she was, the martyr queen, trembling with fear. It was priceless. Esmea smiled to herself and let out a chuckle. You wanted me to kidnap her when she was a baby, and then you cursed her for 100 years, and now you've covered her kingdom in vines and thorns, Rumpelstiltskin said. Why do you hate Queen Sleeping Beauty so much? Esmea glanced at him sideways as she contemplated her honest answer, and then the answer that she would give him. Whatever she said, there was always much more that she wasn't saying. That's where everyone gets it wrong, Esmea says. I'll admit I take great satisfaction in seeing the Eastern Kingdom in a state of turmoil. My reputation was bruised when my fatal spell was reduced to an extensive nap. So, there is an element of revenge that I do take great pleasure in, but the reason that I have attacked the Eastern Kingdom again has nothing to do with Queen Sleeping Beauty. Then why are you causing all this chaos? Rumpelstiltskin asked, nervously looking at the vines and thorn bushes outside. Everything has a purpose, Esmea said with a proud and sinister gleam in her eyes. It's been so long since my last public appearance, I thought the world thought I was dead. I needed to show them that I was back and more powerful than ever. And when better than a day that we were celebrating the end of my last curse? It was devilishly evil of me, isn't it? Esmea closed her eyes, and a wide smile grew on her face. What part of our bargain do you still want me to fulfill? Rumpelstiltskin asked. Surely you don't want me to kidnap Queen Sleeping Beauty now. It was never Sleeping Beauty that I was after, Esmea said, and angrily paced around the chamber. Sleeping Beauty, this, Sleeping Beauty, that. She wouldn't have even had that ridiculous name if it weren't for me. This puzzled Rumpelstiltskin even more. Then why were you after her? He asked. I was after a child, Esmea confessed. A child of royal blood specifically. It's one of the many things I need to complete a special project that I've been working on. A special project? He asked. You mean to take over the world, I assume. That's what you've always wanted, isn't it? Esmea looked him straight in the eye. Something like that, she said. And it's a lot harder than it looks. Shortly before I met you, I figured out a way to do it. An enchantment of sorts. It's a very complex formula that requires a certain properties to be claimed and special assets to be obtained. You know, I once managed to gather all of them together. Not even the fairy godmother would be able to stop me if I did that. It's been more than a century since I last saw you, Rumpelstiltskin said. Why have you decided to strike now of all times? Esmea waved her hand, and the stones in the floor rose to form a large chair. You haven't been around, Rumpy, Esmea said, and took a seat. While you've been locked away, I've had quite the century. It's not as if I've been lying around this whole time. I've been betrayed. I've been poisoned. I've come back from the verge of death stronger and more powerful than ever. Poisoned? Rumpelstiltskin asked. By whom? Evely, Esmea said, as if the name were a disease. Evely, Rumpelstiltskin said. Who is that? She was supposed to be my solution, Esmea said. However, she ended up being my greatest disappointment. She waved her hand again, and the stones in the floor formed a stool for Rumpelstiltskin to sit on. It's a long story, so have a seat, Esmea ordered. Rumpelstiltskin didn't argue. After I cursed the Eastern Kingdom, I went into hiding, Esmea explained. I may have been the most powerful fairy in the world, but I was no match for all the other fairies put together. I knew I couldn't strike again until I was further along with my project, until I was past the point of no return. So I plotted in secret, keeping a watchful eye on the kingdoms for the pieces that I needed to continue my work. I assembled a quaint little castle in the northeast where no one could find me, and plotted out what my next move would be. But it required so many elements outside of my reach that I knew I would have to be patient. I brought many troubled souls into the castle, hoping to produce a proper apprentice, but they all failed me, each being a bigger disappointment than the last. Many years later, in the charming kingdom, when the late King Chester was just a prince, the palace had an unexpected visitor one night. A young maiden banged on the palace door, seeking shelter from a horrible rainstorm. Chester instantly fell in love with her and asked his parents for permission to propose. Being the old-fashioned king and queen that they were, Chester's parents said he could only marry the maiden if he could prove that she was of royal blood. So the prince devised a plan to test the maiden's royal status, made her a bed in the guest chambers with a stack of a dozen mattresses, placed a pea under the very bottom, convincing his parents that only a royal would feel the imperfection through the mattresses. The next morning, the maiden complained about the restless night, and Chester was certain that he had found his future wife. He asked for the maiden's hand in marriage, but she refused his proposal. The maiden had a secret. She had tossed and turned with discomfort all night because she was pregnant, not because she was a princess. The maiden had been simply a peasant who had run away embarrassed to be with child out of wedlock. She disappeared from the palace as quickly as she had come. The Prince Chester never saw her again, and naturally, when I heard about this so-called pregnant princess on the run, I was intrigued, knowing that I needed a royal child. So I tracked her down in the forest where she was living on her own in a cave. To my delight, she was very much with child when I discovered her. I made her an offer that she couldn't refuse. In exchange for her child, I would give her a life of riches and luxury beyond her wildest dreams. You know, the usual. She agreed, and then the deal was made. Unfortunately, she backed out of our agreement shortly before giving birth to the child. She ran into a neighboring village, died giving birth to the little girl, whom the villagers named Evely. I soon discovered that the maiden hadn't been royal, and Evely couldn't be the child that I needed. I let the villagers raise her, while I conceived another plan to get use out of Evely after all. I was going to train her to seduce and marry Prince White of the Northern Kingdom. Together they would produce an heir, and I would finally have a child of royal blood that I desired. Unfortunately, when I returned for Evely, in her adolescence, she had fallen madly in love with one of the village boys, a pathetic, aspiring poet named Mira. I told Evely that my castle in the northeast to begin training her. I took Evely to my castle in the northeast to begin training her, but all she did was cry and whine every day and night about how much she missed Mira. So I brought the boy to her, imprisoning him inside of a magic mirror. I thought that it had been a kind gesture on my part, but it only caused Evely to grow more spiteful. She conducted a plan of her own against me. She broke into my room of potions and concocted a poison that was so strong that a few drops on the touch outside of her window and all the trees and plants for miles around were killed. Evely laced a small dagger with the poison and stabbed me with it. The poison almost killed me. I shriveled down to the state of a dying human. I lost all my power, all my beauty, and all the hope that I would fulfill my plans for the future. I ran as far away as I could, fearing that Evely would try to finish me off, but the stupid girl was all consumed with trying to free Mira that she forgot about me. Anyway, an old witch named Hagatha found me in the woods, barely alive. She recognized me and the effects of the poison. She brought me to her small hut in Dwarf Forest and nursed me back to health. I became her apprentice, but she treated me horribly, taking advantage of the person that I once was. She sent me out on the most gruesome errands and forced me to sleep outside like an animal. Ironically, the poison is also what saved me. The happily ever after assembly had been looking for me since I cursed the Eastern Kingdom. They didn't recognize me in my frail state and decided that I must be dead. But one day, after a few decades, Hagatha and I were collecting plants from the thornbush pit that she had planted around her hut. She was forcing me to do all the work, and my hands were scraped and scratched from all the thorns. But I remembered feeling more angry than I ever had in my life. I was furious that I, the woman who had once been more powerful than anyone else, had become a witch's slave, and with this anger, I felt something different. Suddenly, I felt alive again, like a candle had been relit inside of me. After many long years, my body had finally recovered from the effects of the poison, and my powers had come back. It's true what they say, what doesn't kill you really does make you stronger. I am living proof of that. I was more powerful than ever before. My powers were different, too. My magic had always come from a happily ever after source, coming from a life among fairies. And that's why every curse I created could be broken with a kiss or a token of affection, but not anymore. This time, my magic had no limits. I pushed Hagatha into the pit and cursed the vines and thorn bushes to trap anything that came close to it, Esmea confessed. You pushed her into the thorn bush pit? Rumpelstiltskin asked. All this time, that's been your magic festering in that godless place? Indeed, the enchantress said with a boastful shrug. Believe me, I wanted to take credit for it, but I still had work to do before I went public again. I returned to the castle and collected my belongings, ready to complete what I had started so long ago. But I knew that I would have to continue being patient. The kingdoms were experiencing a golden age. Cinderella and Prince Charming were married. Sleeping Beauty had just awoken. Snow White was crowned queen. If I waited until the right moment, my return would have a much bigger impact. And now it has. Rumpelstiltskin feared what her newfound strength would mean for the future of the kingdoms. I've never understood you, he said. You used to be so admired and loved by the whole world. Why wasn't that enough? Where did it all go so wrong? The enchantress looked at the floor with a snide expression. People only love you as long as they're getting something out of you. But the minute you say something they don't want to hear or do something they don't want to see, all the admiration drains from their hearts. But why this obsession with power? Rumpelstiltskin asked as cautiously as possible. Why do you need the world, Esmea? Esmea let out a long sigh. I have my reasons, she said sharply. And quite frankly, I don't give a damn if you or anyone else understands. A tension grew in the room, but it wasn't between Esmea and Rumpelstiltskin. It was between Esmea and the world. But where do I fit in? Rumpelstiltskin asked. If you're so powerful now, why do you need me? Well, that's simple, Esmea said. Out of all my apprentices over the years, you have been the most loyal to me, Rumpy. You actually started what I asked of you, and now I'm going to let you finish it. Besides, it'll be nice to have a friend around once I take over. They exchanged a weighty glance, both aware that this was nothing close to friendship. There's another child, isn't there? Rumpelstiltskin asked with a heavy heart, already knowing the answer. You want me to kidnap another child? Precisely, the enchantress said. Rumpelstiltskin lowered his head and closed his eyes. He knew he wouldn't have a choice this time. Refusal would mean death. Well, that's enough catching up for one day, Esmea said and glided towards the door with a newfound spring in her step. Come along, Rumpy. There's much work to be done. I've waited almost 2 centuries for this, so as you can imagine, I've grown very impatient. The stone sank back into the ground and Rumpelstiltskin fell on his behind. Where are we going? He asked. Hagatha's old hut, the enchantress said. It's where I've been spending most of my time since my castle was destroyed a year ago. You should see what I've done with the place. A little magic goes a long way in Dwarf Forest. Rumpelstiltskin nostalgically looked around his tiny cell. It never seemed so much like home until he was being forced to leave it. I just have to say goodbye, Rumpelstiltskin said sadly. Esmea raised an eyebrow, not knowing what on earth he was talking about. Perhaps prison had been harder on her small friend than she had imagined. Rumpelstiltskin got on the floor, took the bowl off of the daisy. I have to go now, he said, fighting back tears. Please, don't look at me like that. You'll be all right. He lightly stroked one of its white petals. Goodbye, little flower. Please take care of yourself. Rumpelstiltskin stood and walked through the doorway, leaving his cell for the first time in 127 years, but stepping into a world of even harsher imprisonment. Esmea lingered in the doorway, glaring down at the flower. She couldn't believe something so small and inferior could be so important, so protected, or so loved. It ignited a fire inside of her. The enchantress waved a hand in its direction, and the daisy withered away, crumbling into bits of nothing. A smile appeared on her face, so satisfied to destroy something even so small. Wow.
Wow. That was unnecessarily cruel. Harsh. Like way harsh, Ty. Way harsh. All right. Even though it's 20 minutes before we usually end, I'm going to go a bit early so that I can finish all the stuff that I got to get done. I need to shower and all that. But I see you, clueless reference. The idea that I had before, I don't know if any of you were around when I was talking through how I might like change things so that I've been thinking about starting a Patreon and changing the price structure of things so that not that things are more expensive, but that things are like locked for people who pay attention. So like more difficult slimes that I don't want new people to purchase would be locked under a thing where like only people who are right for it. Like I've been thinking about doing that, and like roll for slimes and customs would only be available in there because then I know that people won't like order something that they can't handle, and the price between the two would equal the same. So like the price of the thing and the price of the slime would like whatever. But the thing that I just thought of just now, so I've been trying to figure out a way to finish the book that I've been writing, and everyone, like so many people have been like, finish your book, finish your book, finish your book, especially book club people. And Secret Boyfriend was like he's been really like on me, like, this is what you went to school for. This was your plan for your life. Like you should finish this book, right? Like he's been really on me about it because as an artist, he knows like how important it is to finish your projects, right? And I was like, but I don't have a way to like set aside that time and not make money in that time. And I just thought, I was like, what if I create a tier in the Patreon for anyone who wants to read it where you get a chapter like every month or every other week, and it adds up to the cost of a book. So like it would be like $1 for each chapter or whatever like that. And it would add up to the cost of like, you know what I mean? Something like that. He's super supportive. But like that way people would get to read it and you wouldn't have to wait until it was fully published. But that would also make me enough money to spend hours writing it, because those hours wouldn't be wasted. I'd still be making like at least minimum wage on those hours. Does that make sense? You know what I mean? So like it would be like the old times. I don't know if you guys ever knew about this, but like there were novels used to be released in magazines as serials. So you would get a new chapter every month in a magazine of a novel. Like Charles Dickens did this. That's how like Charles Dickens novels were done before they were like officially published. And then in the end I can publish it, and then anyone who has the Patreon won't need to buy like the book because they'll have already had all the chapters, but then like new people can buy the book. So I just thought of that and I was like, that's not really a bad idea, because it wouldn't cost anyone who's reading it very much, and people who want to read it anyway are going to be like, yeah, $1, sure, whatever. You know what I mean? So that's something interesting. Pretty interesting. I was like, that actually seems like not a bad plan of how to get like the book done without it taking away from my work hours, but still like giving everyone something out of it. You know what I mean? You'd be getting the book. Yeah, especially for book club folks, like people who want to read something, they get to read it. And maybe we'll do a book club live on Patreon only, where I'll read the book there, so you guys can hear it in the voices as well. We'll have the written version and an audio version, but it would be locked under Patreon just for those people. My friend Ellen's been talking about it. She does like a lot of like special Patreon only like lives and Zooms and stuff like that, so that like you don't get the riffraff in there and you don't have trolls. You know what I mean? Like we don't here in the morning, but like if I started making slime on here, obviously we'd have trolls and stuff. But if we made slime on Patreon, we would only have just like the good people, you know? Like give me the highest membership tier and I'm still buying your normal slime in the book. You're so sweet to me, Shelly. But like, you know what I mean? I want to make sure that everyone gets something that's worth their money, but I feel like that is worth it because we all read anyway. It's not a bad idea. All right, I'm going to workshop that idea over the next couple of however longs. And it is a pretty good idea, actually, because everyone gets something out of it. Okay, cool. Well, I will see you all later. If you guys haven't seen my most recent video, go laugh with me, because everyone swears up and down. They were like, you just didn't use clear glue. That's why the experiment didn't work. I was like, okay, I'll use clear glue and I'll prove it to you. I used the clear glue. It still didn't work. These people are crazy. I hate when people lie on videos for clickbait. They're like, look, you can make fluffy slime with just 2 ingredients. No, you can't. Stop it. Stop being ridiculous. I hate the liars. I really hate clickbait, you guys. I really do. Like, I don't like when people say things that are false just to like like now everyone's going to buy those ingredients and they're going to be like, what did I do wrong? It didn't work. It doesn't work. It's not possible. You have to have an active ingredient. It's ridiculous. You have to have activator. Anyway,
you all know my soapbox about slime. There's so much in it. I know there is so much clickbait, and I won't participate in it. You know what I mean? Like, I will not lie for views. It's just not, it's not gonna happen. And like, it's the same thing. I mean, Amanda, we were talking about it before. There's so many slimers who will make something that looks flashy, but when you get it, it's not a good slime. And some people ask me, they're like, well, why don't you make one that looks like that? I'm like, because I'd rather have a slime that looks simple and is good quality and will last a long time than something that like looks flashy and only lasts you a couple of days. Like, it's just, I don't know. That's not why I play with slime. I don't play with slime. I do play with slime for the look of it. I love the colors and the stuff like that. But like a slime like Lover, to me, with no charms, no funny business, just beautiful, like tie-dyed colors together in a great scent and smooth and easy to play with, is so much better than something with like crazy whatevers that you're like, oh, I got 2 plays out of it and now I have to throw it away. Because Lover's going to last a long time, because it's a good clay-based slime. It's got 3 clays in it. But anyway, you all know. I don't have to tell you guys. If you're in book club, Nobody who's in book club doesn't know all these things. I'm just babbling. Anyway, I'm going to go shower before Catherine and Zoe come over because I haven't seen them in a week and I miss them desperately. So I'd like to see them before I have to get back in the car and drive into oblivion. Mwah! I'll see you all later.